Good morning and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up to make sure we hit as many Celtic fans as possible. Now, before we talk about Adam Idah has been spotted out in public, and so is another Celtic player that is on fantastic wages but hasn't been seen for a long time. Yes, he's risen from out of his hiding and he's made an appearance on Instagram. And I also want to talk about towards the end of this video. But before we talk about that, let's talk about managed decline at Celtic over the years. And I'm going to go back a lot of previous Celtic managers at this point. Now, whilst we are all worried about the current lack of transfer policy at Celtic, it's not been nothing new because let's face it, we can go back a time, and I'm going to go back to Davy Hay. I'm going to go back to Davy Hay and maybe even, after him. Billy McNeill. Billy McNeill was a manager who managed Celtic twice, and he's been one of very few to manage Celtic, but he did manage Celtic twice. And why am I talking about Billy McNeill as Celtic manager? Well, this is Brendan Rodgers' second stint as Celtic manager, and at the time, Billy McNeill and Celtic were unable to match the financial clout of the the Dead Rangers. The Dead Rangers. At the time, they were financially doped, and Celtic were unable to match that. But as his time as manager, Billy McNeill won 4 championships, 3 Scottish Cups, and 1 League Cup. After that, Celtic decided to bring in Liam Brady. And obviously this was under the old board. So yeah, it's something that hasn't really changed. And the reason I want to talk about this is because Peter Lawwell was still at the club in the 1990s, believe it or not. Liam Brady came in as Celtic manager, and yes, if you can remember the Liam Brady years as a Celtic supporter, you'll know that this is one of the darkest periods at Celtic. We did finish third in the league under Liam Brady, and we did finish a lot worse than that under the next manager, Lou McCarthy. Yeah, but it was a I can't even talk about it. It was a time that I classed as managed decline, and Celtic have done these over the 2000s as well. After Lou McCarthy, we brought in Tommy Burns. Tommy Burns brought in some fantastic players. Celtic spent a little bit more money on foreign stars, on foreign players, and it was a good time to be a Celtic fan because the football was absolutely fantastic. Although we didn't achieve much under Tommy Burns. He lifted the Scottish Cup in 1995, beating Airdrie. That was a fantastic day. I was in Ibiza for that day. I was in Ibiza that summer, actually, in 95. So I did miss the Scottish Cup final because I was already in Ibiza, but I can remember the exact pub I was in, and I can remember dropping to my knees and shouting with joy when, and as many Celtic fans did in that pub. And then you could tell who were the Rangers fans because they walked out. It was funny as anything. But anyway, Tommy Burns didn't really achieve what we'd kind of hoped. And then came in Wyn Jansen. Wyn Jansen did what he was asked to do. Dr. Joe Venglos, Mr. Continuity. And then a period where you could say we started the modern era of managed decline. It was brought in a young manager who was backed up by a Celtic legend and a Liverpool legend. This guy on his own right was a Liverpool legend, but it was John Barnes. John Barnes, yes. And yeah. Although that season under John Barnes was horrific for Henrik Larsson because that was the season that Henrik Larsson broke his leg. And anyone that remembers that game, it was a horrific leg break in the UEFA Cup. And we all seen his ankle go a completely different way that it should be naturally, and it was devastating. And you seen it on the telly, and I think it scarred a lot of people for life. And we all thought that Henrik Larsson would never become the player that he did afterwards. And people forget that about Henrik Larsson's career. He had that really, really bad leg break in that season, the 99-2000 season, but he went on to be an absolute bloody superstar for Celtic. But John Barnes and the team were doing absolutely rubbish, and John Barnes was relieved of his duties. Kenny Dalglish did go on to win the League Cup that season with Celtic, and it was at the time that our owner the owner that is still the major owner from this day, that bought the majority of the shares from the one and only Fergus McCann, Mr. Dermot Desmond, brought in, and it's the first time that he said, no, right, this board, they're absolutely useless. I'm going to get the man that I think that Celtic needs. And then comes manager Martin O'Neill. And we all know the story between between Martin O'Neill and Celtic between 2000 and 2005. We obviously went on that fantastic run in 2003, but it was the extra time defeat against Porto, and he steered us to our first European final in 33 years at that point, and it was fantastic to get to that. Unfortunately, the adventure was to end with a lot of boos, and I'll always remember that final and the final whistle, because when Porto did go up to lift the cup, it was Celtic fans shouting cheats, 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 because let's face it, Porto were diving all over the place. But Martin O'Neill spent a lot of money. He did spend a lot of money. And then, as always happens with the Celtic board and the money men, was a period of managed decline, you could say. And in came Gordon Strachan to steady the ship from 2005 to 2009. And he won 5 leagues, 1 Scottish Cup, and 2 League Cups. And then the managed decline goes on a bit further. We bring in Tony Mowbray. Yes. If you remember Tony Mowbray, he did have a semi-successful spell at Hibernian. He did have a sort of, it was Tony Mowbray. And after a 4-0 defeat away to St Mirren, I remember that game, it was horrific. And it was a sad, and we knew he had to go. We knew Tony Mowbray had to go. But that ushered in a period. It did usher in a period. For 2010, we made Neil Lennon manager. Neil Lennon stepped up from the development squad. He didn't have any experience as manager. He didn't have any experience at managerial level, first team football. He stepped up from the development squad to become caretaker manager. And he then went on to start what was the run to 9 in a row. And Lenny will always be remembered for that. And he's seen some fantastic football, and Lenny will always be there for when the 125th anniversary, and Celtic fans and the Green Brigade did the first full stadium tifo for the 125-year anniversary. And I remember the build-up for that, and I remember the fundraising that the Green Brigade went through, and it was absolutely fantastic. And that night we played Barcelona, and we'll remember what happened that night. Tony fucking Watt. Wow. The crowd went absolutely ballistic. I think we ended up about 5 rows down. We couldn't believe it. It was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But then Neil Lennon left, and you could say that we went through another period of managed decline at Celtic. And although there was no Rangers in the league, we brought in Ronnie Dyler. And Ronnie Dyler, from 2014 to 2016, I've always said it was a fantastic time to go to games. A lot of people say, it was a shite time. There was a section of the stadium closed because Celtic fans didn't fancy it. But if you went to games at those times, as I did, week in, week out, it was a fan, and everyone that went to away games loved Ronnie Dyler. And I see that Paul the Tim posted a video of Ronnie the other day on his socials, where him and Ronnie were doing the Ronnie Roar at an event in Ireland. And you know, whatever you say about Ronnie, he was a manager that had the continuation of winning things. And anybody will say, anyone could have managed Ronnie. Anyone could have done what Ronnie did. Well, it was Ronnie that done it. But it was, let's face it, another period of managed decline at Celtic. And it was at that point, again, our owner, and the reason I'm going on about this is this is an important summer. And the reason that I want to talk about the fact that Celtic went through these managed declines before, I think last year was probably the first real summer of managed decline for a while. But after Ronnie, our owner again stepped up to the plate and went out and got Brendan Rodgers. On the 23rd of May 2016, Brendan Rodgers stepped onto the turf at Celtic Park with some 13,000 Celtic fans to welcome him. It was the homecoming, people said. It was the homecoming of one of us. He managed the team to a treble, first treble in 16 years, and only the fourth in the club's history. Only the fourth treble at that point in the club's history. Well, since then we've went on and won treble after treble. I think we forget how hard it was to achieve that. It was only our fourth when Brendan Rodgers did it for the first time. And we went through a fantastic period then. But the board, as always, held the manager back. He did hold the manager back. And the fact that we didn't get John McGinn, started the downfall of what would be Brendan Rodgers' time at Celtic. And we all know what happened then, and we'll move on. But home came Neil Lennon to step up to the mark. Neil Lennon had just been sacked not long before by Hibernian. And you could say that the managed decline under Neil Lennon's tenure kind of continued. And we lost the 10. We did lose the 10. There was other circumstances, COVID, etc. We abided by the rules. When a team across the road were getting their COVID tests sent to Belfast to get tested in a lodge in Belfast. But anyway. But then up stepped our owner once again and made a phone call to a guy in Australia. And there's a sort of up and down graph, and you can see the points during the Celtic time over the last 20 years where the Celtic owner has stepped into the mark, and he made a phone call to Ange Postecoglou on the recommendation, obviously, of the board. They said, this is the guy, can you speak to him? It obviously needs to come for the top. And he phoned Ange and he had a conversation with him, and he said, I'm going to tell the board that you're the man. They're not looking for anyone else. You are the man. What do you need? And he asked Ange, what do you need? And this is Ange's on record saying this. And he said, nothing. I'll just come myself. And I believe in what I can do. And I believe in the backroom staff that are there. And Ange Postecoglou was successful. He brought in a lot of players. He spent a lot of money. But last year, he decided to depart. Last summer, he decided to depart Celtic. Was that because he knew there was going to be another period of managed decline at Celtic? Celtic weren't going to go out and spend the money that he thought was needed to take Celtic to that next level. Instead, we went out and we spent around about 16 to 19 million on prospect players. And you're going to say, but then we brought in a lot of players, but it wasn't to the standard that Ange obviously thought that we needed, because if he did think we needed it, he maybe would have stayed. But he knew the players that were going to be lined up that summer, and it was, let's face it, another period of managed decline. And then steps the one and only Brendan Rodgers after getting another phone call from our owner. Now, this summer, takes us into a transfer window where it's not a case of managed decline anymore. It's a summer where we could finally blow away that title of 55. We could claim it ourselves. We can actually bury them. There's been many times over the last 20 years that we should have buried them. We should have buried them and been so far ahead of them that they would never be able to catch us. And that kind of didn't happen a lot. But this time, and even Chris Sutton has been speaking about that in his column today, he says the fact that this could be the summer that we have a good push at Celtic. It's a big chance to create something else. Rodgers' second spell is hopefully fully underway. The team will return this week, and we're going to talk about the team in a minute because there's big Idah news and James McCarthy. Yes, big James McCarthy news. Some people didn't want Brendan back. He goes on to say, he stood on the steps at Paradise, and he says in May, hopefully we'll come along and win a trophy in the Scottish Cup, and we did. He backed up these words, having an unbelievably injured first season, but He goes on to say, Rodgers and Celtic need to make the right moves over the next couple of months. They have a real chance to blow Rangers away and also make an exclusive mark again when facing the continent's elite. Let's get it right. You should never look back over the fence. What Rangers are doing isn't of Celtic concern. They have to mind their own business, and they will. To those of us outside, it seems that there's a golden opportunity to hammer home an advantage over our biggest rivals financially. Winning the title last season whacked another 40 million into the Parkhead coffers, and at the same time, it kept the Ibrox piggy bank. That has a serious effect on what respective clubs can do in the transfer market. It gives Celtic a huge chance to stride further steps ahead of Clementine's squad and his rebuild. It's not been helped with the fact that they've got a stadium that is falling down. But we needn't even worry about what's happening across the road. We needn't worry about the fact that they're bringing in so many players. He's never going to be able to do what Ange Postecoglou did, let's face it. But Chris Sutton goes on to say, Ibrox has been a powerful ally in Europe in recent seasons. They've not qualified for competitions in the new look league phase as yet, but they've had a good run in Europe. Celtic Park needs to get back to being somewhere that creates massive noise every European game and becomes a sort of cauldron. And I think we all agree that. We all need to get back to, and as fans, we need to get back to the atmosphere that we had under the first time under Neil Lennon. Because since then, the European atmosphere at games has not been what it was. Let's be honest. Let's all be honest. It's not been. There's parts of the stadium where you can hear the crisp packets. Chris Sutton goes on to say it was interesting to see John Kennedy speak about European impact during the week and the desire for it. It hasn't been good enough for Celtic over recent seasons, says Chris Sutton. Some of the performances on the continent have been dreadful, and it's something that needs to be fixed. No one seriously thinks Celtic are going to compete for the trophy, but it's not possible in the modern world to get better results and get beyond the groups. Has to be the target. And finally, a home win. A home win has to be the target. Although the dead rubber against Feyenoord last season got that monkey off the back, we need to do it again. We need to do it again, says the one and only Chris Sutton. Now, whilst Celtic need to get this summer right, some of the players are still on their summer holidays. And yes, it's a strange one with because remember a couple of weeks ago, now did return to training with Celtic and he's all smiles. But if you remember in the video a couple of weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, I think it was, I showed you O's Instagram. And has hidden every single picture that he'd ever put up about Celtic. He's obviously not deleted them, but there's obviously a way to hide pictures on Instagram. But today, they're back. All the pictures are back. Now, I wonder if O has been told, look, you're going nowhere. If we don't get Adam Idah, you're going absolutely nowhere. And I wonder if that's been the situation. The fact that a couple of weeks ago, he did take down every picture, and he only had the ones with him back in South Korea. But today he's got all these Celtic ones back up, which is an interesting one. Now, talking about Instagram, there is one Celtic player who is who's been back on Instagram, and it's Adam Idah. Adam Idah, you can see here, last night, Friday night, he is still on holiday. It's probably the reason why the talks are taking so long, because he's on holiday and Norwich are playing slow ball, and they know that there's nothing going to happen with Adam being on holiday. But he was pictured with the man of last season. Yes, the man that was the talk of the town last season, Jamesy Forrest. Yes, wherever they are on holiday, he was pictured with Jamesy Forrest, and the two of them having a bit of a laugh. And thumbs up, the boys in green. So Adam Idah, that obviously set all sorts of rumours flying. Adam is a guy that wants to come back to Celtic, so it's all about the board and everything, just getting things done right. And it's good to see Adam with Jamesy Forrest on holiday, wherever they are. I hope they're having a fantastic time. And I wonder if Jamesy Forrest will be back. And next week, I suppose he will be back. But there was another player There's Paolo Bernardo a week ago. That's an interesting one with Paolo Bernardo with his other half. But there is another Celtic player. Yes, another Celtic player. Let me just find them just now. It's James McCarthy. Yes, James McCarthy has taken to social media for the first time in a long time. I think the last time was 82 weeks ago. It was 82 weeks ago that James McCarthy was last seen on social media. No one's seen James McCarthy. And there was a couple of, um, and it's an interesting one. He's obviously on holiday with his family one day ago. How he's still on holiday, I have no idea. Why he's not at Celtic Park, first day of training. Because let's face it, he wasn't away with any national team. But he's pictured with his missus and his two kids. Fair play to him. He's been picking up a fantastic wage at Celtic over the years. But that's the big James McCarthy news. He's come out of hiding and he's on social media. He's locked the comments so nobody could say, "Oh, you, what the fuck are you playing at? What are you playing at?" So that's the big James McCarthy news. He has taken to social media for the first time in over 82 weeks, and he's put a picture up of him and his missus and his kids. Fair play to him, but he's a player that we need to get off the books. And it was live last night. James Forrest would obviously be given some extra time off to go on holiday after being away with Scotland and get some time for some relaxation. Adam Idah did play a game for Ireland just after, I think it was a friendly, just after the season did finish, and he has been spotted with the one and only James McCarthy. When it comes to other Celtic news this morning, there's a couple of silly little stories kicking around, but I think the big one is this summer Celtic seriously need to bury that mob from across the road. We need to bring in signings that are not project signings. We need to bring in real quality. We need to start off with a goalkeeper. Come on, Celtic, get a move on. And on that note, have a fantastic day, Celtic fans all around the world. Lit.